Welcome to the 6th Annual Jersey Waterworks Conference. This session is Affordable Funding Approaches for Combined Sewer Solutions. I want to thank our sponsors for all of their support, and I want to welcome our panel and encourage everyone to utilize the chat and the Q&A during this session. We'll be able to answer questions towards the end, but it's great as soon as you think of something, put it in, and we will be able to answer your questions. So I'm just going to hand it over to Andy Crooken, who is the moderator, and he's going to open up the session. Thank you, Andy.
Well, thanks very much, Mo. I'm really pleased to be moderating this particular session with this terrific panel. Our topic is affording fundable funding solutions for combined sewer overflow solutions. So across the country, federal regulations and state regulations require cities and communities to address combined sewer systems in a logical and effective way. I mean, I'm sure all of you know that on this conference, the combined sewers are when a sanitary sewer and a stormwater sewer are combined into one pipe. It's an antiquated way. It was the state of the art in the late 19th century, early 20th century. But certainly, once the advent of the automobile had been undertaken and much more impervious surface, that these combined sewer systems didn't work and were abandoned in the early 20th century. But the original first initiators of adopters of sewer systems like Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, and 23 communities in New Jersey used combined sewer systems. When it rains during with the combined sewer systems, there's only 3 places that the combined sewage can go. First of all, when you mix rainwater with sewage, if you mix a gallon of rainwater with a gallon of sewage, you now have 2 gallons of sewage to deal with. And so the stormwater addition to the normal sewage volume makes it just insupportable for the combined sewer system. For example, in Camden City, the dry weather flow for Camden City was about 10 million gallons a day. But on a normal rain event, a strong rain, nothing out of the ordinary, that flow could go up to 100 million gallons a day. So it just gives you a sense of the magnitude of how much combined sewage is created during a rain event. So federal and state requirements, as I was saying, have been passed, and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection required the 23 combined sewer communities in New Jersey to come up with long-term control plans to deal with their combined sewer overflow systems. So it's the right thing to do to protect the public health from sewage, and it's the right thing to protect our waterways, because there's only 3 places that can happen, or where the sewage can go once it rains. It can either, since the combined sewage is greater than the capacity of the combined sewer system, the combined sewage can either end up in people's basements or streets or parks or in the river. Obviously, we don't want any of those things. Or if it's planned and implemented right, it can end up at a sewage treatment plant and treated like normal sewage. And so that's what the combined sewer overflow long-term control plans require. And that is what you'll hear these practitioners discuss in a few moments. The thing is that it's the required thing to do. It's the right thing to do to protect the public health and to protect our waterways. But how to do it in an affordable way? That's the question as well. We obviously don't want to unduly burden our ratepayers, and especially many older cities across the state and across the country that have combined sewer systems also have low-income households, and in some cases, across the entire community. I used to work in the city of Camden, and the city of Camden had pre-COVID had a median household income of around $26,000, an unemployment rate of 10%. They could not afford rate increases, and so wastewater utilities and communities have a dual challenge that, again, the purpose of this panel is to discuss, is how to make sure that it's really basically sort of a twin challenges for environmental justice. How do we make sure that every household, no matter where you live, no matter what you look like, has not only safe drinking water, but also clean waterways and not having sewage backing up in their basements or streets or parks, but also do it in a way that does not unduly burden low-income households, or any household, but especially low-income households, which are especially vulnerable. So the key is to find an effective solution to the combined sewer overflow problem, but do it in an affordable way. So I'll be talking about it a bit, my experience in Camden, and then turn it over to this terrific panel, our 4 panelists, and you'll get in all 5 different perspectives on how to protect our public health from combined sewage, protect our waterways, but do it in a way that does not sink the ship of our ratepayers, and especially our most vulnerable low-income households. So as I mentioned, for many years, I was the executive director and chief engineer of the Camden County Municipal Utilities Authority, which is a wastewater utility that operates in Camden City, as I mentioned, a very economically distressed community. And the Camden County MUA's challenge was how to assist its partner city, the city of Camden, with its combined sewer system, and also deal with its own regional wastewater treatment plant, and also deal with it in a way that was cost effective and didn't adversely impact rates. As you'll hear from me and from some of the others on this panel, we are very lucky in New Jersey to have a very robust funding program, the State Revolving Fund Program, which in New Jersey is called the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank, led by my friend David Zimmer, who's also a fellow member of the Jersey Waterworks Steering Committee, and hopefully many of you heard the panel he was on Wednesday. So we're very lucky. I mean, the State Revolving Fund is in all 50 states. It sounds like it's a federal program where funds are given to the states. But each state manages it a little differently, and we're lucky that New Jersey manages it in a very robust and effective way. I'm going to just describe what we did in Canada. Before I do that, I just want to again acknowledge my fellow panelists and make sure that everyone can see them, and want to thank especially Congressman Donald Payne for joining us, as well as Councilwoman Ruby Cotton and Charlotte Katzenmoyer and Jennifer Gonzalez. They'll be speaking right after me, and there'll be a significant uptick in the quality of this panel once we get to our panelists. So thanks to my fellow panelists for joining. Anyway, getting back to Camden, the challenge was that significant combined sewage problems. I mentioned that the flow from on Camden City would go from 10 million gallons a day on a dry weather day to about 100 on a wet weather day, and the combined sewer system was significantly dilapidated because of the city's economic circumstances. It wasn't really able to separate the sewer or really keep up with it, with repairs over time. So the approach that the Camden County MUA took as the regional authority to help the city of Camden address its combined sewer problems was basically a multi-pronged approach. There were basically 4 prongs to it: green infrastructure, combined sewer system maintenance, combined sewer system conveyance improvements, and 4th, wastewater treatment plant improvements. We, with many partners, including Rutgers and New Jersey Tree Foundation, statewide partners, and then local partners within the city of Camden itself, we planted a significant amount of rain gardens, riverfront parks, etc., to soak up stormwater, sort of de-pave the city so that the stormwater would soak into the ground as it used to do before the advent of the automobile, and therefore reduce the amount of combined sewage that would be generated and then therefore had to be conveyed and treated. We also work with the city of Camden to encourage them to clean out their sewers as much as possible, because we found that a significant amount of the flooding was due to the sewers being silted up. And think of it as like your arteries in a sense. If they get clogged, they can't convey the blood as effectively. Similarly with the sewers, the sewer pipe has a certain capacity, but it silts up over time. And if the sewers aren't kept clean, then it can't convey the same amount of flow. And again, the thing about a combined sewer system, again, there's only 3 places the sewage can go. It can either go into streets, parks, and basements, 1, 2, into the river, or to the sewage treatment plant. We want that 3rd option. And to do that, we need our pipes conveying the maximum amount of flow to the sewage treatment plant. We also upgraded Camden City's sewer system to increase its capacity to convey more flow to the plant. And lastly, we expanded the receiving sewage treatment plant to make it bigger so they could receive more of the flow that it was getting. All four of these initiatives, these prongs of our multi-pronged plan, were funded through the New Jersey I Bank. And that was really the critical thing. If we had not done that, the cost to our ratepayers would have been significantly greater. So for example, with green infrastructure, let's say if we had a $2 million green infrastructure project, the first $1 million of it had principal forgiveness, meaning we did not have to pay that first $1 million back. So that is essentially a grant. The remaining $1 million would be spread out over 30 years at less than 1% interest. So a $2 million project, green infrastructure project, to soak up stormwater and also provide green amenities to the city of Camden and their residents would cost about $35,000 a year in annual debt service. So that makes the project significantly more cost effective. Expanding the sewage treatment plant costs about, say, $10 to $12 million, but again, spread out over 30 years, less than 1% interest, made it affordable so that we could absorb the increase in debt service without raising rates. So basically, all of Camden's long-term control plan has already been implemented and accomplished. I think about 75 to 80% of it has already been accomplished through green infrastructure and the gray infrastructure improvements I just mentioned, all funded through the I-Bank, the New Jersey I-Bank, and without raising rates to Camden City residents. So I compliment the New Jersey for having the I-Bank. I compliment David Zimmer, the longtime leader of the I-Bank. It's something that every community in New Jersey can take advantage of, and we're lucky to have that funding resource available to us. Lastly, you'll also hear about stormwater fees. Stormwater from our panel. Stormwater fees. Stormwater fees are a very effective way. Philadelphia has used them. You'll hear about one of our panelists how they use stormwater fees. And stormwater fees are a way to more equitably spread out the cost of a combined sewer system. What it does, it recognizes that if you have a parking lot on a dry weather day, of course the parking lot isn't generating sewage, but on a wet weather day, rainwater hits the impervious surface at the sewer system and then it becomes sewage itself. That sewage has to be it has to be contained and treated in the same fashion. So the idea of a stormwater fee is to have the owner of that parking lot pay for the impervious surface and pay for the stormwater combined sewage that it generates. So thanks very much for listening. The last thing I'll say is that our work in Camden, what you're going to hear from our four panelists, was all done through the lens of a triple bottom line benefit. The idea that the wastewater utility should try to not only make the project cost effective, but also try to optimize community benefit and environmental benefit as well. So with that said, I'm very pleased to turn it over to our panelists. And the first panelist is Councilwoman Ruby Cotton.
Thank you. I'm just excited about being here this morning with the panel. I just want to thank New Jersey Future for inviting me and including me. I just want to just say a little about myself. I'm in my third term of my election here in the city of Paterson. I have one of the most challenging wards to represent, the 4th Ward. And let me just say that the president's constantly talking about the city of Paterson and its voter fraud. I can say that the ward that I wanted to be able to tell my other council colleagues the importance of doing the CSOs. And even just the makeup of our city, our average income in the city of Paterson is like $34,000 a year. 20% of our population is Black and African Americans. 30% is white. 61% is or Hispanic. So for us to be able to tell them what needs to be done, we want to include the community. And we do our best to include the community and what we need to do with our CSOs. I have been on the council going into my 9th year, and I see the money that we every year. We average probably $4 to $5 million a year just doing sewer repairs. Over the last 15 years, I think we spent about $5 to $6 million to replace our sewer line, and that's the goal that now we're trying to work on, to replace our sewer, separate them from the combined sewer to wastewater to household sewage and street. So that's going to be a long term, and that's what I finally had to say to my council colleagues, in the city council, to kind of help them to understand that when the DEP and the EPA has says the can has to stop, you have to do something. You have to decide to do something. So we're going into our long-term control plan, which I can say that we did file our permit on time on October the 1st. We did do that. So to say can has to stop being kicked. And I think that now my council colleagues kind of start to understand that we have to do something. But I can say that, with the long-term control plans that we have, it could cost anywhere from the low end of 70 million to the high end of 800 million. With a city of Patterson with the average income of $34,000 a year, you know it would be very hard for us to fund this. With us getting transitional aid from the state of New Jersey, we have to come up and we have to work closely. And I can truly say that Patterson has been working closely with the New Jersey Department of DEP. We have been working with the United States EPA, and we have done this. And I've seen it over the last 9 years that I've been here. We have to make, I can say too, the Snake Valley Sewage Commission has been working with us to see that we can get some of the things that we need to get done and that we will get it done. But I want to say that for Patterson, I know that we cannot do this by ourselves. We're going to need funding from the state. We're going to need funding from the federal government. And I can say that our engineer that we have here in the city is constantly working closely with all entities that's going to help us to be able to put the plan in place that we need to put in place. Right now, the city of Patterson, we have about 62 different ethnic groups here in the city. And sometimes I think that could be the difficult part of having people to understand why we need to separate people. Sometimes I would say, do you understand what happens when you wash your dishes, when you flush your toilet? Do you understand what happens to that? And so that'll make them to start to think about, well, yeah, really, what does happen? So I can see that working closely with the community. I have a few projects that I've done. I built a park called Martin Luther King Park. As you know, Dr. King came to our city in 1968. The city of Patterson was the last city he spoke at before he was assassinated. So I finally was able to put together, along with my Patterson Habitat for Humanity community, MLK Park. And in that park, we put the rain garden in there. I've also was able to do another park my second park, which is Barber Park. We have a rain garden that we put in there. So, and I also have a garden in my ward, the 4th ward, a garden, and it's huge and is run by Deacon Davis. And we also put a rain garden. So there's things that we need to try to put in place to help children, and we bring the children in to explain to them, different what the rain garden means and how we're supposed to save water and how we're supposed to separate everything. So with that being done, I can see that it's starting to see. So when I was talking to my engineer, I looked at the timeline that we have, the things that's in place, and I was laughing with him because we're going all the way to 2060. And I said to him, 2060 is a long ways off. But they're saying to the cities like Patterson, in each of those years, this is what we need to have done in place. And we need to kind of understand that in certain needs, they want 10 acres of the city separated. So I know now that we have 2 projects that we get ready to work on now to separate our sewer lines at the major avenues in our city, and one is West Railroad Avenue, other one is 21st Avenue. So we are clearly working on that now to separate it. I also I looked at the city of Newark, and I believe it was Newark. They have a program there called Adopt a Catch Basin, and I started that with my green team. Our mayor here in the city of Patterson, Mayor Andre Saya, started the green team, which is the for the CSOs that we need to work on and improvement of the city. So along with the green team and myself, we did a program of adopting the catch basin. And the whole purpose of that is, I remember when when you get those flash storms that come, what happens is that your catch basins get clogged with debris, and now with this autumn, with the trees and the leaves, I see that they're full up with leaves and leaves. So we have gotten about 80 residents so far in the city to adopt a few catch basins, and they clean them. And I remember we had a really bad storm a couple of years ago, and my block that I live on for 35 years has never been flooded. And this particular day it flooded, and I'm in the middle of the block, and it came all the way to the middle of the block. And that's what really kind of gave me the idea. The guy had to go underneath the water to try to clean up the catch basin so that the water would be able to flow. So I'm happy about that program, because I see now that more people are starting to adopt the catch basin. Even if you do 2 or 3 of them, do a couple blocks of them, you'll be surprised how when it rains, especially when it's fast rain that comes, how we can how the water will flow smoothly through that. So I think that because of people at Passaic Valley Sewer, for the 22 years, I understand, what the discharge means, and trying to relay this back to my community. As I say, we have 62 different ethnic groups, and trying to make them understand the need that we need to do to do this CSOs and what we've done so far too. This with our city, with the new mayor that we have changed the rates, the way we pay our sewer bills. I remember saying a few years back that we've been putting out of our own city budget anywhere from $3 to $4 million every year just to fix our collapsed sewers, just to repair them. And I'm gotten to the point now, I kind of know when I can see a sewer get ready to collapse by riding through the city. I see the roadway starting to sink down. I kind of pay attention a lot to it, and I can say that my engineer says he's appreciate me being able to say to him, I need you to go check block so-and-so, because as I rode past it or through it, it was like a dip, and a dip means that something is getting ready to happen. So with that being said, I just want to say that I'm excited to be here today. I just want to say that my engineer understands, and he's happy that I'm sitting on the city council to kind of understand, to explain to my other council colleagues the importance of doing the CSOs and the importance of having a long-term control plan that we need to put in place. And I said to them, I said, it's just gotten to the point now that it has to start somewhere, and it's just happened to be that we're here now on the city council, the members that are there now, the can stops here for us, and trying to make the community understand the importance of all this. So I appreciate it. I understand it, and and we're in the process of doing more parks, and in the process of doing more parks, we're going to do more rain gardens in our parks, which is lovely. And also the runoff, we're going to plant some runoff from different parts of the city, especially coming from some of our churches. So that's important. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm telling you, it's just a pleasure to be with every one of you sitting here. And it's an honor that New Jersey Future thought enough of me to say, Councilwoman Ruby Cotton, we want you to be on the panel with us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Cotton. I really appreciate your remarks and letting us know what you've been doing in the city of Paterson. It is so important that we have the support of the practitioners, have the support of elected officials to move forward with the important CSO improvements that are needed to protect the public health and to protect our waterways. Thank you very much, Councilwoman Cotton, for your remarks.
Yes.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Jennifer Gonzalez, the Director of Environmental Services and Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Hoboken, a longtime practitioner in our water sector here in New Jersey, and a great member of Jersey Waterworks. So Jennifer, please take it away.
Sure, thanks, Andy. And also thank you, Councilwoman Cotton, for those really inspirational words. I actually started my career in Passaic County and did a little bit of green infrastructure work in Paterson, long time ago, we'll say. And it was, it's really great to see how far it's come. So it's amazing. So thank you for your leadership. I just want to check before I start. Do you all see my screen? Okay, excellent. So this of a presentation that is actually available to on our website to the members of the Hoboken community that explains really what green infrastructure is, what the city's comprehensive stormwater management strategy is. But I added in a lot of information on specifically how we finance those projects. And I say that just to note that a big part of our goal with stormwater management is educating our community about why we do it and how we do it. And this is one of the tools that we use for that purpose. So this is a story map that basically shows you that Hoboken has a combined sewer system. In fact, it's actually owned and operated by the North Hudson Sewerage Authority, which is our sewer purveyor. And they are the entity that holds an individual CSO permit for the wastewater treatment plant located at the north end of Hoboken at Adams Street. Their long-term control plan seeks to improve water quality, reducing CSO events to 4 per year. In some in Hoboken, there currently is this graphic shows you a little bit about really what a CSO is. I assume most people on this call are really familiar with CSOs, so I won't get into it too much. But effectively, CSOs in Hoboken will overflow into the Hudson River. So we're trying to help both rainfall flood mitigation and also water quality improvement through a partnership with North Hudson Sewerage Authority on their long-term control plan. This map shows you really what happens during an intense rainfall event. So anytime the city of Hoboken experiences more than 0.8 inches of rainfall per hour, which is what we deem an intense rainfall event, we will get localized flooding in these areas outlined in blue. Not necessarily limited to those areas, but those are the most frequent areas where we see combined sewage, backing up. We see localized flooding in roadways, potentially basements, etc. So back in 2013, Hoboken started to really embrace green infrastructure, and the first step was working through the Together North Jersey program on a technical assistance study to develop a green infrastructure strategic plan. And this graphic really illustrates the outcome of that plan. It shows Hoboken and shows the area that has subsurface conditions that are more attuned to things like green roofs and rainwater harvesting, or above ground features of green infrastructure. And those are the detention features, we call them. Infiltration features here in green. These are things like bioswales, stormwater planters, rain gardens. And then in our blue area, that's the area that we have really flagged for large scale retention. Looking at resiliency parks that have large scale retention during storm events. And we focused on green infrastructure back then because one of the things that we did during the green infrastructure strategic plan was we looked at the total cost of separating our sewer system. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. We realized that wasn't going to be feasible. We also realized that the construction impacts from doing a completely separate sewer system would just cripple, the city. We couldn't embark on such a project. So instead, we wanted to maximize the use of green infrastructure and leverage gray infrastructure systems like underground detention to manage as much stormwater as possible during rain events. So under the leadership of former Mayor Zimmer and now currently Mayor Bala, we really started to incorporate green infrastructure into all of our capital projects and try to construct multi-benefit capital projects due to how cost-effective it was. Right after Superstorm Sandy, we obviously Hoboken was incredibly impacted by Superstorm Sandy, and we worked with the federal government, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection on a comprehensive water management strategy. So that water management strategy includes 4 parts that we'll talk about today. The resist feature is really meant to resist against flooding that occurred during Sandy type events, which is coastal storm surge flooding. But the flooding that we'll talk about today is rainfall flooding, and how the city and NHSA are working together with other partners throughout the region to implement water quality improvements and also flood mitigation improvements. So through the Rebuild by Design program, the state of New Jersey received a $230 million grant to implement the resist feature. However, the city is really focused now on implementing the delay, store, and discharge features. So in this map kind of illustrates how all 4 of those parts work together. Delay meaning to delay stormwater from entering the system, storing stormwater in the system in that area that I had flagged in blue before, discharging stormwater from the system actively during a storm event through wet weather pumping stations, and then after a storm event through smart sensors, and then resisting coastal storm surge inundation. This map actually shows you our current green infrastructure, our proposed green infrastructure features. You'll see our proposed Northwest Resiliency Park, which will be the largest resiliency park here in yellow, and also all of these green sites identified in these little dots are green-gray right-of-way green infrastructure measures that were recommended by Rebuild by Design, as well as 2 additional resiliency parks, NJ Transit and the Southwest Park, that were recommended by Rebuild by Design. Add these to our current green infrastructure sites, which include our rain gardens on Washington Street, we'll talk about today, several other right-of-way green infrastructure measures throughout the city in these little blue points, as well as 2 existing resiliency parks, 7th and Jackson and Southwest Park. This is one of our first delay projects, so delaying stormwater from entering the system during a rainfall event. And that's the porous pavement that we installed at our fire headquarters. We actually have 3 different porous pavement installations in Hoboken, one at our fire headquarters, which is porous asphalt, a porous concrete installation at our police headquarters, and porous concrete behind City Hall as a plaza really for the community and employees. This project at the firehouse delays 23,000 gallons of rainwater in the porous asphalt system. And this was probably one of our smaller green infrastructure projects. It was approximately $106,000 and was funded straight through our municipal capital. This compares to some of our larger green infrastructure projects we'll talk about today that were funded by a variety of different funding sources. The City Hall Stormwater Demonstration Project shows various different green infrastructure best management practices, and it was meant to show our community how if we disconnect our downspouts at City Hall, you can disconnect your downspout in your house and prevent it from going into the combined sewer system. It delayed rainwater from entering the system through 4 cisterns, 2 rain gardens, and the porous concrete plaza that's shown in this image here. This was closer to $300,000 and it was funded by our capital program. However, we also used the IBank in order to gain both principal forgiveness as well as low interest loan financing. And Washington Street was, I think it was the second project we actually did with the IBank. And I think Washington Street is probably the best example of a multi-benefit project that we have. It was a large-scale rehabilitation project that installed 15 rain gardens, each of which delays somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 gallons of stormwater, with a few larger ones in there. And it included a complete streets redesign, installation of the conduit for a microgrid, replacing water mains, and obviously these rain gardens. So it had both a drinking water SRF loan from the NJI Bank and as well as a clean water SRF loan. In addition, we had grants from Tiger as well as funding from the New Jersey Division of Highway Traffic Safety's Pedestrian Safety Enforcement and Education Fund. So we really just coupled every funding source that we could together to get this project done. And we ended up saving a significant amount of money by going through the iBank for both the drinking water and clean water portions of the project. Now heading into the store projects. These are the projects in the blue area of the map that are really large-scale retention projects. They're trying to create additional capacity to detain stormwater during heavy rain events. 7th and Jackson is our second resiliency park. It's a big example of a store system because it stores about 466,000 gallons of stormwater runoff. And the great thing about this was it was entirely funded and constructed through a redevelopment project. So New Jersey Future did a great developer's guide to green infrastructure recently and featured this project as a case study. It is a great partnership between the developer as well as the city. They constructed the project, which was about $16 million. Of that, 468,000 was the detention system itself. And it was then deeded to the city once it was complete. So now it's a public park, and you would never know that these pipes are underneath this field. Southwest Park was our first resiliency park, and we worked very closely with the iBank on this project as well. This project stores 200,000 gallons of stormwater runoff and was approximately $5.6 million. It was funded, again, by a collaboration of different funding entities and grants, $250,000 from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, funding from the Hudson County Open Space Trust Fund, the Hoboken Open Space Trust Fund, as well as $1 million in principal forgiveness. So that's effectively a grant from the New Jersey iBank. Over the 20-year term of the loan, we will save about $2 million, which is close to 40% of the project cost. So it's a significant cost savings to the city by using the iBank. Our biggest resiliency park that's currently under construction, with the Northwest Resiliency Park, this park will delay and store up to 2 million gallons of stormwater through a variety of different features shown on this map, including rain gardens. We have a basketball basin that's like a depressed basketball court that will store stormwater, rain gardens, and an underground gravel detention system under our athletic field. The park will include, at the surface, an open lawn, civic terrace, ice rink, multi-purpose athletic field. So you'll have no idea that all of these really heavily engineered green infrastructure and gray infrastructure measures are underneath and within this beautiful park space. It's under construction right now, and this is a photo from about 2 months ago, September 2020. This is the 1 million gallon detention tank that is being constructed underground. It's actually no longer visible. It's been backfilled. You can't see this amazing piece of infrastructure anymore. But this will store up to 1 million gallons of stormwater from the H6, H7 drainage areas. And the benefit of this from a water quality perspective is that it will reduce the CSO events from about 4 per month to 4 per year in those sewer sheds. So this graphic we put out on social media a few times just to highlight the numbers and benefits behind the Northwest Resiliency Park, but it also shows really the cost of the project. The total project cost is about $58.8 million. We were lucky enough to receive a $10 million grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency through FEMA's BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Cities. $1 million in grants from the Hudson County Open Space Trust Fund. We're also using the Hoboken Open Space Trust Fund. And we did receive $2 million in principal forgiveness from the iBank. So in total, we'll be saving about $18.8 million over the term of the loan, which is 32% of the project cost, plus the $2 million in principal forgiveness. And then the last piece of our delay, store, discharge strategy is the discharge, and that's actively pumping stormwater from the system during rainfall events. So during intense rainfall events, these wet weather pumping stations, like this one that you see here for our H1 sewer shed, pump water directly out to the Hudson River to keep it from flooding our streets. This was constructed by the North Hudson Sewerage Authority, as is this pumping station, which is the H5 sewer shed pumping station. This pumps about 40 million gallons per day during wet weather events. It was constructed in 2016 as a partnership between NHSA and the city for $10.2 million. NHSA borrowed from the iBank, just like the city has for a lot of our other projects. And they received $2 million in principal forgiveness and about $4.5 million in savings, which is 43% of the project cost over the life of the loan. So a tremendous amount of cost savings by going through the iBank. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'm sure we'll do a little question and answer later. But thank you so much, Andy and Jersey Waterworks, for the opportunity to present.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was terrific. Really appreciate you letting us know what's going on in Hoboken. That sounds really exciting. So we've had two terrific panelists so far. One thing I would just take a minute to ask the attendees, if you have any questions for this panelist, please put them in either in the chat or in the Q&A, because that's an opportunity for questions and answers directly with the panel. Also, speakers, please, of course, mute your lines when you're not speaking. I'll do the same in a sec. Our next speaker, I'm very pleased to introduce Charlotte Katzenmoyer, the CEO of Capital Region Water. She is a nationally known speaker and proponent in the water sector, and her discussion regarding what Lancaster and also Harrisburg has been doing on combined sewer overflows in an affordable way is really, again, in a national model. So we're very glad to have Charlotte come over the river, so to speak, virtually and speak to us here in New Jersey. Please, Charlotte, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen. Just checking before I begin. Okay. So I'm going to speak about both the city of Lancaster, where I served as the Director of Public Works for over 17 years, and also about the city of Harrisburg, where I currently serve as the CEO for Capital Region Water. In Harrisburg, we're a regional asset. We provide drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater services to the capital of Pennsylvania, as well as 6 other municipalities surrounding the capital. This is our treatment plant along the Susquehanna River, and the Susquehanna River ultimately flows to the Chesapeake Bay. So we have as well as the city of Lancaster also is in the Chesapeake Bay tributary. So we have a dual challenge of not only being CSO communities, like many of those in New Jersey, but we also have nutrient requirements that we have to meet for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup. We also have a drinking water plant, and everyone needs a Zen moment at a time like this in the pandemic. So just wanted to show you what our 6,000-acre reservoir looks like. So that always gives me a little bit of peaceful moment to look at that. In Lancaster, we had over 120 projects that we had been working on prior to my departure from there. We had completed about half of those and captured close to 40 million gallons annually with those projects. And I'll talk about a lot of those green infrastructure, or at least one of those green infrastructure projects coming up. As some of you have mentioned, we did use the state revolving funds for a lot of these projects. So in Pennsylvania, that's our PennVest program. So we used, I think it was $7 million from PennVest in Lancaster, and we currently have $13 million in Harrisburg that we are using for green stormwater infrastructure projects. We also, I'll show a list of other funding sources that we've been successful in using. In addition to the state revolving loan funds, we have used state gas tax, a liquid fuels program in Pennsylvania. We've used various types of transportation related funding sources. Our Department of Environmental Protection at the state has several funding sources, one of them being Growing Greener. DCNR funds a lot of our park projects, and we've received money from that program, as well as what you might not expect for an urban environment, dirt and gravel road maintenance funding. They typically use for rural areas, but because of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, they put some money aside for urban roads that are low traffic. So alleys, our older cities have a lot of alleys that we were able to use that funding source for. National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, we've received several grants from them, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and we've actually done some crowdfunding for some of our public art projects that I'll mention in a few minutes. So one of the projects that I want to highlight was a project in Lancaster that was a green infrastructure project that included a series of BMPs, including bioretention, permeable pavers, infiltration beds, and tree plantings. The combination of practices infiltrate, capture, and reuse rainfall, all while producing an aesthetically pleasing amenity for local businesses near the intersection. And we actually have some economic development impact that we saw from this project. One of the happiest customers may be the neighboring Lancaster Brewing Company, which is right, the building that you see, the largest building that you see in the center of the picture. We were able to construct an outdoor cafe seating area surrounded by native plantings and an attractive curvilinear planter with a seat wall that divides the cafe area from the roadway. We also realized a 5-mile-per-hour reduction for traffic calming through this intersection, which is really a gateway into the downtown. So this was the artist rendering that we used during the public participation leading up to the construction. And the Lancaster Brewing Company dubbed it the Beer Garden. We were very happy to work with them. We were able to achieve 1.7 million gallons of stormwater reduction, and this was an intersection that often flooded during heavy rainstorms. So this, you can see the cafe area after it was constructed and in use. Permeable pavers were used in the cafe area. And the restaurant actually did some urban gardening in the curvilinear planter that was constructed as part of the project. And we did a public art project as part of the project. We had crowdfunding, as I mentioned, from lots of local residents as well as others from around the country who wanted to take part in a project like this. So the artist envisioned it to be this cistern which captured rainwater from the rooftop of the brewing company. They envisioned this to be reminiscent of some of the silos that you see in Lancaster County. We also did a placemat for the restaurant to use that helped educate the public about the importance of managing stormwater. So I want to talk a little bit about the process that we use for developing our stormwater fee, both in Lancaster and in Harrisburg. One of the joys that I had, and you can read sarcasm into that, being a new CEO with Capital Region Water, was I got to implement the stormwater fee in Harrisburg. So luckily I had with implementing one in Lancaster in 2014. So the process that we used was listing the drivers that are really driving us towards needing to implement a stormwater fee. So we highlighted the regulatory compliance that's needed, aging infrastructure. Harrisburg really suffered from a lot of deteriorated infrastructure because of the financial difficulties that the city faced. They really did not invest a lot of money into their sewer system, and localized flooding. So we highlighted those areas that needed assistance through localized flooding. We looked at financial modeling, so I'll show you a little bit about the financial capability analysis that all CSO communities are required to do. We defined the stormwater program. We, as mentioned earlier, long-term control plans are often developed in CSO communities, so we did that in both Lancaster and Harrisburg. In Harrisburg, it was dubbed the Community Greening Plan or the City Beautiful H2O program plan. And in Lancaster, I'll show you how we publicly branded our long-term control plan there. We developed pilot projects, which I think is very important as you're launching your long-term control plan public process, to have projects that are that you can show every neighborhood what the plan is going to look like as it is built out throughout the city. So there wasn't, we had various neighborhoods that we highlighted for these demonstration projects, which really helped with the public education campaign. And then we implemented the stormwater fee. We had a report, which is very important. You really need to have the basis of your fee really well developed to really be supported if you are challenged legally, that it is actually a fee and not a tax. So that's very important. We also had a lot of public engagement. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. We had an advisory task force in both Lancaster and Harrisburg, where we had representatives of all different types of stakeholders. We had governmental entities that were involved. We had developers. We had realtors, neighborhood groups. So we tried to be all inclusive with that advisory task force. So with in Lancaster, we branded our campaign as Save It, Your Water, Your Money, Your City. And we had a website specifically dedicated to the campaign that talked about the problem. So you'll see a tab for that. We had lots of local projects that were highlighted. We had a tab for resources where developers or residents could go onto that resource tab and learn what they can do in 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days, different types of projects that they could do to really help be part of the solution. And in Harrisburg, they branded the campaign as City Beautiful H2O. It harkened back to back in the early days of Harrisburg's development. There was a City Beautiful Parks program that really started cleaning up the Susquehanna River. It was really, as you can imagine, in the early 1900s, many CSO communities, their waterfronts were just full of trash from the combined sewer system overflows. And in Harrisburg, we have 60 overflow locations. So we have quite a challenge, but you know, this City Beautiful H2O program is how we branded it in Harrisburg. So talking about financial capability, we looked at, and Harrisburg and Lancaster are really very similar in our demographics. But you can see that Harrisburg has about 32% of its residents live below the federal poverty line. But then when you look at the utility bill, that financial capability really doesn't show the full picture. When you drill down into some of the quintiles within the city, some of the census tracts that have much higher poverty rates, some of those residents had utility bills that were exceeding 3% of their income. And as many of you may know, 2% is the threshold that EPA looks at for being affordable. Then when we looked at different control strategies as part of our long-term control plan, you can see the various lines here that show the different types of control strategies. So sewer separation, that black line that's on the top of the graph, that is the most expensive, as many communities readily see as they do the cost evaluation. that sewer separation is very expensive. Deep tunnel storage, which many larger cities across the country, CSO communities have been doing. You can see that for Harrisburg and Lancaster, that cost curve was still very expensive. And then going down, you can see that a parallel conveyance treatment. So if we were to do parallel conveyance lines for our largest trunk sewers, that's still pretty expensive. That's the gray line that you see in the middle of the graph. But then when you get down to decentralized stormwater management, which is green infrastructure, and satellite treatment, which is end-of-pipe solutions like satellite storage, some of the ones that was talked about earlier, that those two are pretty cost competitive. Then we added a line here to show the high burden level of control. So you can see that we pretty quickly get to that high level of burden for cost, that red line that goes across the middle of the graph. So there's not a whole lot that Harrisburg can spend to in the long-term control plan beyond the 85% capture. So we can get to that with satellite storage and green infrastructure. So that those were the solutions that we're concentrating on. So as I mentioned, we are concentrating on centralized end of pipe and local decentralized green and gray solutions. So we looked at what are some of the benefits, pros and cons of both of these. I'll concentrate on the green infrastructure on the right. It provides the same CSO controls and solutions to basement flooding as a centralized end-of-pipe solution, but it also supports community revitalization and some of the triple bottom line benefits that was already mentioned before. We can use multiple funding sources because it's not just a sewer pipe in the ground. So oftentimes when you use an end-of-pipe solution, you really can't use other grant funding sources for those solutions. And there are lots of mixed small projects that we can integrate all across the city to be able to provide those multiple benefits, such as economic development, park improvements, transportation improvements. So we're really wanting to put a lot of our funding into the green stormwater infrastructure projects all across the city. In Lancaster, EPA used Lancaster as a case study for the economic benefits of green infrastructure. So if you haven't seen this resource, it's a really good resource, how they looked at several cities and did case studies on the impact of the triple bottom line for green infrastructure projects. So you can see some of the benefits that were highlighted in that study. So why a stormwater fee? I won't go through each of these, but two of them I'll highlight is that it's a more equitable recovery of cost. A stormwater fee is based on impervious area, and there have been court cases, Norfolk Southern versus Norfolk, Virginia is one that I'll cite, where the courts have deemed that it is a good correlation to the amount of stormwater runoff from a property, and therefore is a more equitable solution to charging a property owner what they should be paying towards the entire cost of the program. It also, you're able to provide incentives to property owners to implement green infrastructure. So having a credit system in place to incentivize property owners is really an important part of a stormwater fee, and actually is one of the litmus tests to determine whether your stormwater fee is actually a fee and not a tax. And that Norfolk Southern versus Norfolk, Virginia, if you haven't read that case, that's a good case to read to understand the distinction that the courts look at. So across the country, there are over 1,800 stormwater programs. This is a map from the Western Kentucky University Stormwater Survey that they do every year. So you can see across the country how many stormwater utilities are in each state. And in order to show how much more equitable a stormwater fee is, I'll highlight how we looked at it in both Lancaster and Harrisburg. This is how we looked at it in Harrisburg, and we used it as part of our educational campaign. So you can see that on the left, the graph shows if we were to just charge to be able to raise about $4 million of what we needed for the stormwater program annually. If we did it based on a wastewater flow or a sewer bill, you can see that the residential customers would be paying about 48%. They would be shouldering about 48% of the burden of that program, of that $5 million program. If we did it based on a stormwater fee based on impervious area, the residential component, or what the residents are paying, go down to about 23% of that $5 million. And as we looked at the impervious area, those properties that are generating the most stormwater are actually the non-residential properties throughout the city. So you can see that it's more equitable. Comparing the cost in Lancaster, we looked at it a little bit differently. We compared the cost for an average residential customer. If you'll see on the right part of the graph, if we did it based on their sewer charge, they would be paying twice as much if they were being paid based on a stormwater fee, which is the $10 per month on the left of that graph. And a typical commercial customer based on a sewer charge would be paying about $51 per month when they really should be paying $139 per month. Or I'm sorry, this is on a quarterly basis in Lancaster. But that you can see that they're not really shouldering their fair share of the cost of the program. So as I mentioned, there are certain elements for a successful process that I see based on a lot of the court cases that I've seen around the country. You have to have an assessment. You basically need to notify the property owner what their stormwater fee would be assessed at based on the amount of impervious area on their property. There needs to be a credit system in place so that they're able to reduce their fee and with different control measures, whether it's downspout disconnects, rain gardens, whatever they may be able to do on their property. In Harrisburg and Lancaster, we made that credit up to 50% of the total stormwater fee. Even if they manage their entire property, there's still public projects that they need to contribute towards. And there needs to be an appeal process. So in case the impervious area data is incorrect or other types of inaccuracies, as I list here, they need to be able to appeal that. So as I mentioned, we did a lot of targeted stakeholder outreach. I met with the top 50 impervious area property owners on a one-on-one basis and went through the whole program and explained why we needed to implement the program and begin charging the fee. And these are some of the targeted stakeholder outreach groups that we also met with. And with that, I'll turn it back to Andy.
That's terrific, Charlotte. Thank you so much. I think that one slide you had with the difference between with the stormwater fee and without the stormwater fee really underscores the inequity of not charging a stormwater fee. I would really argue that and I'm hoping that communities in New Jersey will start to adopt the stormwater fee because it really is unfair. And it's unfair to anybody for that residential homeowners should bear the burden of impervious surfaces like large shopping malls, hospitals, large parking lots, etc. Actually, our homeowners and apartment dwellers are bearing the burden of costs that are generated by private sector entities. And I'll just take 1 second to say that I was on a Jersey Waterworks panel very recently with New York City practitioners from New York City, Philadelphia, and myself representing Camden City. Philadelphia had the stormwater fee, and New York and Camden did not. Philadelphia had 80% of their stormwater fee, or 80% of their revenues toward dealing with the long-term control plan came from the stormwater fee, and 0% from Camden, 0% from New York City. And as you said, not only was it that a revenue equity balancer, but also much of the green infrastructure in Philadelphia was on private property because they, as you said, Charlotte, they had the incentive to put in green infrastructure and reduce their stormwater fee. Camden City, not 1 square inch of private sector green infrastructure. And New York City, the same. So New York City was in the process of implementing a stormwater fee. So that was very, very compelling. Thank you very much. Next, we're really honored to have our final speaker of our panel, Congressman Donald Payne Jr. Congressman Payne Jr., thank you so much for being on our panel. We're so interested in hearing what you have. And thank you also for your service during this very challenging and difficult time for our nation. So we appreciate you taking the time to join our panel. We're really looking forward to hearing what you can tell us. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here with you this morning and to hear all the panelists and the important work that they're doing around this issue. Glad to be here with you and just take a little bit of your time with respect to the issue at hand. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you for the New Jersey Waterworks virtual conference. I want to thank the great people in New Jersey's future for the invitation to speak with you today. Water and sewage are two of the most important issues in every community. That is why it's important to provide federal assistance to local water and sewer projects. The costs necessary to protect and maintain a clean and effective system can be more than communities can handle, and in most cases, that is true. The Water Resources Development Act is one part of our nation's effort to improve water infrastructure projects, but it must not be the only one. That is why I voted for the Moving Forward Act in June. It is a comprehensive infrastructure bill that provides $40 billion for wastewater infrastructure as well as roads and bridges. In addition, it adds $25 billion to a federal fund to remove contaminants from state drinking water. There are other actions I've taken to improve wastewater systems and clean up around our state's water. Also in June, I supported the $84 million from the Environmental Protection Agency to improve New Jersey's water systems. The EPA granted our state $65 million in low-interest loans to improve wastewater infrastructure and stormwater management. Then it provided $19 million to improve and upgrade our drinking water, including steps to reduce contaminants. I know the EPA has been extremely helpful with the removal of lead in Newark's water, which has been an issue for 7 years, and I've been very, very involved in trying to correct that issue. However, there are other opportunities for local communities to get federal assistance for water and sewer projects. The first option is the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. It supports quality protection projects directly for wastewater treatment plants. It covers centralized and decentralized wastewater treatment, non-point source pollution control, and watershed estuary management. The second option is the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. This fund has more to do with drinking water, but it could be a good way to fund projects to keep pollution out of water in small and low-income communities. The third option is the Environmental Justice Grants and Cooperative Agreement Program. These grants provide financial assistance to communities so they can work with other agencies to develop projects to combat public health issues. The fourth option is the non-point source grants program. These grant fund projects to prevent water pollution. They can be used for everything from education to extra funding to protect decentralized wastewater systems. The fifth option would be the Public Water System Supervision Grant Program. This program helps states and territories develop and implement public water systems to improve drinking water. Finally, there is the Water Pollution Control Grants Program. This program provides funds so states can establish and implement water pollution control programs. These are all viable options for towns, cities, and communities to get federal funds for their wastewater management. Some grants can work as the only source of funding for projects, but other grants could be combined with certain programs to protect sewage plants and keep water clean. So I hope I have given you a few options regarding how to pay for future wastewater projects. Those are the grants and programs and that your community should look at in order to work on the issues around wastewater and runoff management. And with that, I have been involved in, I know Passaic Valley very well, Ms. Cotton. As a former member of the Newark City Council, we dealt a lot with Passaic Valley being in Newark. And as a matter of fact, have had quite a few tours through the facility and managing it and keeping it viable and upgrading the system over the years. So as president of Newark City Council, I was very involved with that. Also, I sat on the board of the Newark Watershed, which are the three great reservoirs in upper western New Jersey that supply the water for Newark. And once that water comes down and is utilized by the citizens, then it moves on to Passaic Valley, which I believe manages wastewater for 22 municipalities and towns in New Jersey. So it's quite a flow there. And there was a problem that we dealt with, that I've been fighting for quite some time, but is expensive. There is no meter on the flow that comes out of Newark, but there's a meter on all the other communities. So if there is, and it's a fight that we've been having for quite some time. So if there's a miscalculation on any of those other 221 municipalities, well, Newark eats the for lack of a better term, eats the excess. And it was something that we felt was very unfair. But to put a meter on Newark with hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't know if anybody picked up that mantra since I left, but it's really a big problem. So I've been involved in the issue around wastewater for over 10 or 12 years, and just understand that it is a major problem that we need to deal with, especially with communities such as Councilwoman Patterson Cotton mentioned, I'm sorry, that is a problem for low and moderate income communities, and Newark fits in that description as well. So it's a issue that is very near and dear to me, and I'll continue to do what I can in order to help us work through this issue in a positive manner. So thank you for your time, and delighted to be here.
Thank you so much, Congressman Payne. We so appreciate your remarks and the number of federal funding opportunities for the communities in not only New Jersey but across the country. I've noted that the American Society of Civil Engineers graded our water infrastructure for the United States as a D+ grade, which of course is not satisfactory, and often that water infrastructure is poor in environmental justice communities and lower income communities and communities of of color. And so the need to get funding for our water infrastructure is really an environmental justice matter. Thank you very much for your service and for your comments, Congressman. Thanks so much to all four of the panelists. Wow, I have to compliment the Jersey Waterworks staff, especially my friend Bill Kinberg, for doing such a great job in putting together such a terrific panel. We have a little bit of time for questions and answers, about 10 minutes. I just want to summarize from what I heard as a moderator from the four panelists to say that it seems to me that this combined sewer problem is an environmental justice issue, that everybody deserves clean waterways and not have sewage backing up into their streets, parks, and basements. And so the key is how to deal with the infrastructure problems that cause combined sewage overflows or combined sewage flooding without putting an undue rate burden on low-income communities and harming them in that way. So it's that balancing act that our panelists have discussed today. And I think that the solutions have to be implemented through a triple bottom line basis to minimize cost, especially for low-income households, but also maximize environmental benefit and community benefits. So instead of just putting a big tunnel underground, putting green infrastructure in that provides green amenities for the community at the same time as solving the functional stormwater problem, is really critical. And then the third thing from what I heard is how to do it in a cost-efficient way is definitely using the state revolving fund program that Congressman discussed and all the panelists discussed. In New Jersey, we call it the New Jersey iBank. That's a tremendous asset for New Jersey residents. I so appreciate what Charlotte said about what Lancaster and Harrisburg are doing with regard to the stormwater fee to make it more equitable, and I'm hoping New Jersey communities adopt that as well. And then both Jennifer and Charlotte talked about a number of other funding options that they had thrown in on top of the SRF and the state revolving fund and the stormwater fee. So there's a number of tools available to communities to accomplish the infrastructure improvements without, or at least reducing the rate impact on our ratepayers. So questions. One question I have is for Charlotte. What were the biggest challenges that you found in both Lancaster and Harrisburg to implementing the stormwater fee, and what would you recommend for our New Jersey communities?
So I would say that probably one of the biggest lessons I learned in Lancaster, I did not, even though we had a lot of public meetings and a lot of targeted stakeholder meetings, some of the larger impervious area property owners did not come to those meetings. So one thing I implemented in Harrisburg was meeting, as I said, with the top 50 impervious area property owners one-on-one. And as you can imagine, in Harrisburg, being the capital of Pennsylvania, a lot of those were state agencies that I met with. So the challenge I would say is that state agencies are challenging that across Pennsylvania and saying that they're exempt from paying a stormwater fee. So I think it's pretty unfair of the state to mandate communities deal with stormwater and manage build projects to manage stormwater, but yet they won't contribute to paying for the amount of stormwater that they're generating into the system. So I hopefully New Jersey will take a different approach with that, because in Harrisburg, our non-taxable properties are about 30% of the city. So if 30% of those governmental entities don't pay their stormwater fee, that means residents are going to have to pay a much larger portion, which again goes back to the equity issue, and being able to share that burden across all sectors of the community.
Thank you, Charlotte. I have a question for you. First of all, Jennifer, thanks so much for answering so many. You got so many questions, but you answered all of them, or a lot of them, so thanks for doing that. One question I think I have for me, because we only have 4 minutes left, is how would you recommend getting community engagement and involvement in your green infrastructure projects?
Yeah, so I think that community engagement is probably one of the most important aspects of all of our capital projects. You certainly can't go in and start changing things without asking anybody, right? So every one of our capital improvement projects, we do a variety of different methods of community engagement, everything from public meetings, virtual workshops, or in the case of the past year, Facebook Live events, really anything to try to get engagement. But we also do have a citywide email mailing list with thousands of people on it, and we send out weekly construction updates through that mailing list. So that's a good opportunity for us to get feedback. And then just social media in general has been a huge benefit. Depending on the project and the location of the project, reaching out to senior centers, to our housing authority, to any specific partners or community centers that might be in the area. All of that is stuff that we've employed on all of our different projects. The Rebuild by Design project specifically, the New Jersey DEP had a great community engagement plan, and was led by awesome staff at DEP who worked with the city to develop a community engagement program. So that's something that we do on really any city-led capital project.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Last question for either the Congressman or the Councilwoman. What can we do as community members to try to help support and uplift your work to try to get funding for these water infrastructure improvements?
I think, may I, Congressman? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
please go.
Okay, I think that by us in the city of Patterson here starting the green team, and what they did was the green team was the residents or the constituents in the city that kind of like help. They would go out into the community because they're regular citizens and they live here, and to try to make people understand the need of them being involved and being at the table, and to talking with the elected officials and talking with the ones like us who has to make the decision on putting something in place. So by starting that green team, I saw that it really helped the community because they're regular community people that's on the green team, and I think that's what people would like to see. To me, it's about transparency and putting everything out there, sharing everything with the community, letting them know what exactly everything do cost, and let them know what challenges that we do have. I think the constituents and the community and the residents appreciate when you tell them the whole truth and nothing but the truth, because they want transparency with everything that's getting ready to go on. So establishing that green team, I saw it was really, really a big help in getting it across to other members of the community.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Right. And also I would say that contacting your member of Congress and putting it on their on their map. There's so many issues that we deal with that it could potentially be something that's missed. So reminding them that is something important to your community goes a long way. It's interesting with the federal government. There are hundreds of millions of dollars available for everything you could think of, but it's interesting. I found that the federal government doesn't necessarily always advertise or basically let you know what's available. If you figure it out, well, then they're more than willing to, oh yeah, there's $100 million sitting here. They don't volunteer the information, but if you ask the right question, they will answer it. So I think it's just a matter of the community continuing to interact with your members of Congress and making sure that it's something that is high on your priority list, and expanding out there. And as a delegation, we're very fortunate to have the delegation that we do really in Congress. We're probably one of the closest working delegations when it comes to issues around New Jersey. We really work together. We really are bipartisan in that manner, and work in the best interest of the community. We speak once a week on an entire delegation call, so we have great communication. So this is something that I can bring up next week on the call. The call was yesterday, so but I definitely will raise this issue on the call next week and let my colleagues know that it's something that is being discussed and paying attention. So don't be surprised when you hear from your constituents in reference to this. So I will commit to that, raising the whole issue and sharing with them the things that were discussed today.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And thank you for being on the panel and giving your time to us today, and also all your service representing the state of New Jersey, in the federal government. Thank you so much. And thanks, Councilwoman Cotton, and to Charlotte and to Jennifer. What a terrific panel. I also want to thank our New Jersey future backbone staff, Mo Kinberg and Kim Irby, for putting this together. And both of you did such a great job helping guiding the five of us through all this. And thanks to New Jersey Future and Jersey Waterworks in general for all the great things that you're doing for the water sector in New Jersey, especially with regard to water equity and clean water for all. So thank you so much. Thanks to the audience for participating. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Mo to take you to the next session.
Oh, great. So I just wanted to thank the panel as well, and just let everyone know there was also a sign-on letter that from Jersey Waterworks members to the New Jersey congressional delegation related to New Jersey's priorities for federal water infrastructure spending. So take a look at that. That's on the Jersey Waterworks website. You can add your name and your organization. And just also, hope you guys stay tuned. We have another session coming up right after this, using data to build trust in our water systems. How do we get it right? From 11 to 12:30, and then building a water workforce pipeline, which we're also very excited about, from 1 to 2:30. So those are the upcoming sessions, and thank you so much. I think these are the upcoming sessions, and that's it. Yep. So. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. It was really great serving on this panel with you all. Thanks again, Congressman and Councilwoman, and Charlotte and Jennifer. Great jobs, everybody. Thank you.